It has been a litany of lurches from one mistake to another bad decision. If you take it right back, you can talk about Brexit, misleading Parliament, proroguing Parliament. That he was late locking down. The unfortunate things that have now come out about he said. How awful that must be for people who've lost relatives in this to hear the allegations from Dominic Cummings about what was actually going on in Downing Street. So for us and the Liberal Democrats, this has been, just one piece of chaos, one bad decision, one, catastrophe after another. It could, I'm the very first to admit that there have been very difficult circumstances, but it could have been very different. Too much indecision and too many going back in decisions. We saw in Chesham and Amersham, people who have voted Conservative for decades now think that this Conservative Prime Minister doesn't share their values, doesn't listen to what they're saying, and so they didn't vote for him. And I think
proving quite popular, though, clear. Christine. And you talk about sort of chaos. He's had to engineer what Theresa May couldn't do. One of the most complex pieces of negotiation in terms of Brexit. Also a global pandemic, and our vaccination story has been one of, at this point, overwhelming success. What have been the positives that Boris Johnson has engineered in the last 2 years?
Well, nobody would deny that the vaccine rollout has been a huge success. Our scientists who worked on bringing forward the vaccine are to be thanked and congratulated for terrific work. And yes, the vaccine has worked out. The NHS has done a fantastic job. But you know what? The negatives of Boris Johnson far outweigh, for me, the positives. Brexit is a mess. You ask our farmers, our small businesses, our exporters, our fishing communities, our food producers, and they will tell you about the extra red tape and the problems that they have had since we came to the end of the transition period. Look at Northern Ireland, the Northern Ireland Protocol. I remember the very morning of the referendum, a friend who was a lawyer saying to me, this is going to be a mess. The Good Friday Agreement is now, at stake because the EU are responsible for safeguarding it. And also, it means that there is no hard border in Ireland. And we haven't yet come up with a workable system. That's not good enough. We have to make this Northern Ireland Protocol work. And the government don't seem to know how. So, and I think you saw in that report from your reporter there, that people are equivocal about him.
Christine, Brexit was voted for. Brexit has now happened. How would the Liberal Democrats have done it differently?
Brexit has now happened. None of us are denying that. But what we're saying is the Northern Ireland Protocol isn't working and we need work on that. And the pandemic, here's a perfect example of what Boris could have done better. The pandemic hit while we were in the transition period. We appealed to him. Lots of people said to him, look, we need to extend the transition period. We can't possibly put British businesses, independent traders, our high street retailers, families through the double whammy of COVID and the end of the transition period. We need longer to fix this, to make sure that they have the support that they need and they're not trying to deal with two things at once. But did he? No. And that would have made a big difference to a lot of people in this country.
Question, I think, though, is what would the Liberal Democrats have done differently? The party has slightly fallen out of fashion, or at least out of favour with the public when we look at what happened at the last election. The leader of the Liberal Democrats lost her seat, Jo Swinson. Do you think maybe you have fallen out of favour, so you've lost that political will to actually have the public come alongside with you? Because Boris Johnson has remained over the last 2 years pretty popular.
That was 2 years ago. And you said yourself, Brexit has now happened. Now, I'm not going to pretend that my party didn't oppose Brexit. Of course we did. And we wanted the British people to have the final say on the deal, which we didn't get. We voted for the principle, but we didn't get a say on the final deal. Now, none of that has changed. What we would have done differently, as I have said, Brexit had gone ahead, we would have had the transition period longer. We would have negotiated a different deal. More importantly, we would be putting the small businesses that Boris is just ignoring at the heart of what we do. We would have been standing up for the 3 million excluded in this country who got no support. We would not now be bringing furlough to an end in September, just when we're thinking there might be another wave. We need to ensure that support for businesses carries on into next year. There are families in this country who have gone from being financially secure to worrying how they're going to make it through this month. Businesses which are viable, to use the Chancellor's own terms, which have done well for 20, 30, 40 years, now finding themselves, particularly in the travel industry today, wondering if they'll make it to September. That's not good enough. And it's noticeable for me that the British public in areas where they did vote for Boris Johnson are now saying, well, he's done an okay job. They're not saying this Prime Minister's done a great job for us. And in areas like Chesham and Amersham, which have traditionally voted Conservative, they don't think Boris Johnson's listening to them. On the doors in Chesham and Amersham, we were getting that Boris Johnson simply wasn't listening to them anymore, and they didn't feel that this Conservative government was in tune with their values. Now, that is where the country is at the moment. And for Liberal Democrats, that means we have a lot of work to do, but we are listening to people and we want to protect people and we want to make sure that we come out of this in a strong, healthy position in the economy, and that we don't forget what millions of people in this country have suffered through the past 18 months.
Well, we'll be listening to what the Liberal Democrats have to say as well.
Christine Jardine, thank you so much for speaking to us this morning.
You're welcome.
That's Christine Jardine, the Liberal Democrat MP for Edinburgh West.